Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, today we have another reading of the Therigatha. And this time it is about the Theri or the Elder Sona. And she was also known as Sona with many children. So she had a lot of children. Okay, so we shall first read her story and then we shall read her verses from the Therigatha. All right, so Sona with many children. There was a housewife in Savatthi who had 10 children. Okay, so even those days, it wasn't uncommon to have many children. And even, my grandmother, my own grandmother, my paternal grandmother, she had more than 10 children. So my dad came from a very big family. And it wasn't completely uncommon those days in China to have many children. So yeah, so Sona here had 10 children, and she was always occupied with giving birth, nursing, upbringing, educating, and arranging marriages for her children. Her children were her whole life, and she was therefore known as Sona with many children. So one can imagine if you have so many children, it's pretty much your full-time job, actually more than a full-time job, to just even provide the very basics for her children. Even nowadays, mothers who have let's say even 3 children already say that it's a handful already. And so we can imagine Sona was always busy just thinking and caring and making sure that everything is going well for her children. So she was rather like Migara's mother of the same city, though the latter had 20 children. So Migara's mother, in a lot of the suttas, whether it's Majjhima Nikaya or some others, we read of, the sutta, those of you who remember the sutta starts with, "Thus have I heard," right? Usually. On one occasion, the Buddha was visiting the palace of Migara's mother, okay? Now, when, again, I think in a couple of the suttas, Bhante Vimalaramsi explained the story behind Migara's mother. So Migara's mother actually wasn't his birth mother. So Migara was actually the father-in-law of a lay woman by the name of Visakha. So Visakha herself was born into a wealthy family. She was very intelligent. And if I recall correctly, again, please, those of you who remember better than me, call me out or remind me later. Visakha was very intelligent. So she herself came from a wealthy family, and her parents were lay followers of the Buddha. And so she was also a follower of the Buddha. And it seemed, I think by the age of 7, by I think listening to the Buddha's sermon or following the Buddha, I'm not sure, the teachings, by the age of 7, she was already a Sotapanna. And she grew up, and then she married into Migara's family. So she became the daughter-in-law of Migara, who was a wealthy person and also a lay devotee of the Buddha. Now, Visakha later on became the chief female lay disciple of the Buddha, just like how Anathapindika is the chief male a lay male disciple of the Buddha. So Visakha later became known as the chief female lay disciple of the Buddha. And she was famously known to have converted her father-in-law to become a follower of the Buddha. And out of deep gratitude to his daughter-in-law, he eventually referred to Visakha as my mother, as in he was out of deep gratitude to Visakha. He felt like, Visakha, because of Visakha, he felt reborn, because he came to know of the teachings of the Buddha and became kind of a follower of the Buddha and changed his life. So that's why in the suttas, it's say in the palace of Megara's mother. Really, what it is this huge monastery that was built by Visakha for the Buddha, and this was also in Savatthi. So I read somewhere else. So the Jetavana monastery that was donated by Anathapindika is in Savatthi, and what's commonly referred to the palace of Megara's mother, which is also the monastery that was built by Visakha, is also in Savatthi. So a lot of the suttas were delivered in Jetavana, and some of the suttas in the beginning, it's mentioned when the Buddha was staying at the palace of Megara's mother, or when the Buddha was visiting in the palace of Megara's mother. So it's not a palace, but it was so big and so grand, and it was built and offered to the monks that it almost felt like it was a palace. So it was also in Savatthi, happened to be. And Visakha had a lot of children as well. She had 20 children. So hopefully if I can find, I'm not sure if Visakha was also wrote verses, but I'll see if I can find. Otherwise, her story is quite interesting. So I'll see if I can find, before I jump to conclusions, are people interested to know about Visakha's story? I'm just going to pause here to ask to those who dialed in, would you be interested to know more about the story of Visakha, or Megara's mother, as commonly referred to in the suttas? Yes, no? Anyway, you can let me know if there's enough interest, then I'll see if I can dig up some background information about Visakha. Okay, so here just a commentary. We may find such an abundance of offspring in one family somewhat strange today. However, this was not uncommon in Asia and even some parts of the West. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, my paternal grandmother had at least, if I'm not mistaken, I think about 13 children. And of course, during the war, out of poverty, some were given, like, adopted away kind of thing. And some probably didn't survive. So in total, it's probably more than 30, I'm not sure actually. Anyway, that aside, so Sona's husband was a lay follower of the Buddha. After having practiced moral conduct according to the precepts for several years, while living the household life, he decided that the time had come to enter into the holy life. So he became a monk. It was not easy for Sona to accept this decision. Well, of course, because they have 10 children. So, yet she did not waste her time with regrets and sorrow, but decided to live a more religiously dedicated life. So here it says, she called her 10 children and their husbands and wives together, turned her considerable wealth over to them, and asked them only for support for her necessities. So one can only assume that Sona's husband probably waited till the children had all grown, had their own formed their own families, and then decided, well, my children are now all able to take care of themselves, so I shall now go and lead a holy life, become a monk. And so Sona then decided herself that she will live very basic, and then just ask her children to just support her for her basic necessities. And for a while, all went well, and she had sufficient support and could spend her time in religious activities. But soon it happened that the old woman became a burden to her children and children-in-law. And one can imagine, even nowadays, this is not uncommon as well. They had not been in agreement with their father's decision, and even less did they agree with their mother's devout attitude and religious speech. Okay, so although Sona and her husband were followers of the Buddha and very devoted, their children were not. So indeed, they thought of their parents as foolish because they would not indulge in the pleasures their wealth could purchase. They considered their parents mentally unstable, religious fanatics. And this attitude made them despise their mother. Again, this is not something that is, that it's quite possible that it happened. And even today, we hear of stories where, some families not supportive of a family member, let's say, wanting to be more serious about their religious studies and all that. So, those of us who do have support from our family members, we should count our blessings, because it's not, sometimes not everyone has this privilege. And in fact, in the Mangala Sutta itself, Sutta of, it's a translation, Divine Blessings, not sure. But anyway, the Sutta, Mangala Sutta is a commonly used sutta it's commonly recited during festive occasions in Buddhist countries. In the beginning of the sutta, it's named, a particular deva, very bright, comes and visits the Buddha and asks, what is regarded as blessings, and so the Buddha goes through, this is it, that's the blessing, blah blah blah. And one of them is also support from the parents, let's say father, mother, family in general. Other things are like living in a suitable locality, blah blah blah, all that kind of thing. So it's also mentioned in the Mangala Sutta how important, it's a blessing to have support from family members. So let's come back to Sona and her children. So her children quickly forgot that they owed all their riches to their mother, that she had lavished many years of care and attention on them. Looking only at the present moment, they considered the old woman a nuisance. The words of the Buddha, that a grateful person is as rare in the world as one who becomes a noble one, proved true again in this case. So that's a commentary. The increasing disdain by her children was an even greater pain for Sona than the separation from her husband. And, those of listeners here who are mothers probably can relate a lot. As a mother, mothers sacrifice everything to care and attend to their children's well-being. And so for her to be considered a nuisance, obviously, it's a great pain. So she became aware that waves of bitterness arose in her, that reproaches and accusations intermingle. So she realized that. And she realized that what she had taken to be selfless love, pure mother's love, was in reality self-love coupled with expectations. She had been relying on her children completely and had been convinced that she would be supported by them in her old age as a tribute to her long years of solicitude for them, that gratitude, appreciation, and participation in their affairs would be her reward. So this is very interesting, you know, even as an elderly woman, she came to realize that herself. So first she came to realize bitterness arose. And then she came to realize what she thought was pure mother's love was in reality, yes, it was love, but came with expectations. And the expectation was that because she had devoted her life to care for her children, that in return, her children would care for her in the same way as she grew old. Had she not looked at her children as an investment then, as an insurance against the fear and loneliness of old age? And this is a very interesting reflection, very interesting, because a lot of times, not only in this aspect of between mother and children and things like that, in many different contexts as well, we need to be, first of all, very self-aware, and secondly, very honest with ourselves, because in the example given here of Sona, the expectation for reward and everything, etc., can be disguised. It's just how the mind works, really. And in a lot of cases, in her case, it was very revealing because she came to realize this herself. So obviously her level of self-awareness was fairly high, because not everyone comes into this realization themselves. And she came to realize that, oh, quite possibly, she saw her children as an investment for her future, or as an insurance against the fear of getting old. Very interesting reflection. So in this manner, she investigated her motives and found the truth of the enlightened one's words in herself, namely, that it was a woman's way not to rely on possessions, power, and abilities, but solely on her children, while it was the way of the ascetic to rely on virtue alone. So here, although it's translated as the way of the ascetic, we can think of it as the way of any student or any practitioner who is on the path to rely on virtue. Virtue here relates to the precepts. So what this commentary is trying to explain is that the Buddha very clearly mentioned that, you know, you can say insurance, so to speak, is our precepts, because that's what guides us. That's, you know, many times in the Dhamma talks that Bhante Vimalaramsi gave, Venerable Sister Kema gave, the precepts are like our protection, our kind of like an umbrella. It protects us from hindrances, all sorts of hindrances. And it also is a way to safeguard us on our journey of the practice. So it is the way of practitioners to rely on our precepts as a so-called insurance, if you want to call it that way, and not to rely solely on her children as her insurance. So it's quite, you know, in Sona's, to Sona's credit, you know, that she came to that self-realization herself. Of course, she was already a follower of the Buddha, but that she came to that realization herself does speak a lot about her as a practitioner. So her reflections brought her to the decision to enter the Order of the Nuns so that she could develop the qualities of selfless love and virtue. So she realized that, then I might as well become a nun, not because I want to escape, but because I really want to spend more time to develop selfless love, pure love, and virtue, in this case, the precepts. So develop further and further fine-tune, further, we want to say, perfect the precepts. Why should she remain in her home where she was only reluctantly accepted? She looked upon the household life as a gray existence and pictured that of a nun as brilliant, and so was ready to follow her husband's path. She became a nun, a bhikkhuni, in the order of the Buddha's followers. But after a while, she realized that she had taken her self-love along. The other nuns criticized her behavior in many small matters. She had entered the Sangha as an old woman and had dozens of habits and peculiarities which were obstacles in this new environment. She was used to doing things in a certain way, and the other nuns did them differently. And this is, again, not uncommon even till today. Not that I have direct experience, but I've heard stories where, and it's really quite sad, but it does speak a lot about our communities, unfortunately. So I've heard, sometimes people are a little bit worried. I'm not saying they don't encourage, but they're a bit worried to accept elder women when they want to join the Order of the Nuns in a later stage of their life, and then be, really asking their motivation, etc., probably takes a longer time. And of course, there's always this probationary period, so to speak, etc. But it's all really, it's not meant to be negative. It's really all meant to make sure that the whole community, because we're living together, practicing together, working together, keeping the monastery or temple compounds clean, everything. There's a lot of things that need to be done together as a community. And so, and that's why there are bhikkhuni rules as well. It's all meant to ensure that there are conducive environments that would allow everyone to practice together and grow together along the path in the most harmonious way. So when I read this, I was like, oh, that's interesting, because even 2,600 years ago, during the Buddha's time, they had these problems too. So it doesn't mean that we are very much different today. We're still experiencing the similar kind of issues. And that's because that's what we humans are made up of. We're made up of the 5 aggregates: the body, the feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, and how dependent origination works. And as long as we are human beings, we all will encounter a similar kind of habits, peculiarities, conflicts, discussions, arguments, etc. That's what makes us all human. So not much different. Okay, let's continue. Come back to Sona. So Sona soon realized that it was not easy to reach noble attainments and that the order of none was not the paradise she had envisioned, just as she had not found security with her children. She also understood that she was still held fast by her womanly limitations. It was not enough that her weaknesses were abhorrent to her and that she was longing for more masculine traits. She also had to know what to do to effect the change. She accepted the fact that she had to make tremendous efforts, not only because she was already advanced in her years, but also because until now she had only cultivated female virtues. The masculine characteristics which she was lacking were energy and circumspection or investigation. So here again, it's I'm assuming certain things, so call me out. It's talking about the factors of enlightenment. So she felt that she was lacking in the energy and investigation of the Dhamma. So Sona did not become discouraged, nor thought of the path as too difficult. She had the same sincerity and steadfastness as her sister nun, Soma. So she had a fellow nun by the name of Soma, who said, "What's it to do with a woman's state when the mind, well composed, with knowledge after knowledge born, sees into perfect Dhamma clear? For who, indeed, conceives it thus? A woman am I, a man am I, or what then indeed am I? Such a one can Mara still address." So here, just to summarize a little bit, so Mara is this common connotation in Buddhism, and it basically is a general connotation that describes anything that hinders our progress. So some depictions of Mara include this like demon-like being. Other depictions could be just, our hindrances, again, overpowering us and blocking us on the path. So it's just a general connotation of whatever is hindering our progress. So here, what Soma is trying to say is that whoever says or thinks that am I a woman, am I a man, or what am I, then that person is still being hindered, because in a lot of the sutras here and there and everywhere, when somebody goes and asks the Buddha, can you explain this? And then the Buddha is like, the question itself is asking the question itself. That's what's suggesting where the problem is. Because the Noble Eightfold Path, the first one, so to speak, is harmonious perspective, seeing everything as impersonal. And so this very statement question, asking oneself, that means taking it personally already. So that's what, in summary, Soma is trying to say. So it became clear to Sona that she had to develop courage and strength to win victory over her willfulness and her credulity. She realized that it was necessary to practice mindfulness and self-observation, basically right effort, basically 6 hours, and to implant into her memory those teachings which could be at her disposal when needed to counteract her emotions. So this is important. So one of the reasons why we want to study the suttas I think this was also mentioned of my memory, Bhante Vimalaramsi or Venerable Sister Khema used to mention, why we want to try to study the suttas is because we can use them at our disposal. When certain emotions arise, we know how to use whatever we have studied to counter those emotions. Be it when somebody says something or when we encounter something and we suddenly get angry or we suddenly get upset or whatever it is, or whatever form of negative emotions that could arise due to whatever we perceive at that point in time. If we have been studying all these teachings, we can use them. Now, of course, Bhante Vimalaramsi very ingeniously packaged it into this little toolkit, if you want to think of it, as the 6 R's. And really, it's right effort, and it's purifying and retraining the mind, really. And by practicing the 6 R's, it's like a tool that we can use to counteract our emotions. And last week, Hugh led us through a reading of Majjhima Nikaya on the qualities of a true student. And we discussed, quite a bit about how to use the 6 R's as a tool to investigate the teachings and to further our practice, and not as a stick to drive away our hindrances, if you want to see it that way, not a stick to beat or get rid of what we don't want, but it's a tool for us to further investigate. I think Venerable Sister Khema used the analogy of a microscope, I think, one time or another. Okay, coming back to Sona. So what use would be all knowledge and vows if she were carried away by her emotions and her memory failed her when it was most needed? And this is very, just one sentence, but actually it is a fairly powerful sentence if we think about it, and it's good that Sona realized this herself, because when we need to remember, Sona herself had been a lay follower of the Buddha before she joined the Order of the Nuns, as opposed to some of the other nuns that we came to know before. So hers was a little bit different, but now she begins to realize, what's the point? If she had studied all these years, she had taken whatever vows, what's the point if she's still carried away by her emotions, or she cannot remember teachings that when she needs to use it, she can't remember it. So this is something that probably is also a useful, powerful reflection that we can use for our practice as a reminder as well. What is important in the practice? And again, this is very nicely followed after the reading we had last Sunday with you. In the first half of the sutta was mentioned, like so-called non-true student, they can have this accomplishment, they can do this, that. But what really is important is to remember what is important in the practice. So these were the reasons which strengthened Sona's determination and willpower to learn the Buddha's discourses. Through many a night, thereby, she attained the ability to memorize them. Furthermore, she took pains to serve her sister nuns in a loving way and to apply the teachings constantly. After having practiced in this way for some time, she attained not only the assurance of non-returner, but she became an arahant, fully enlightened, a state she had hardly dared to hope for in this lifetime. It happened without any special circumstances to herald it. after she had made a wholehearted commitment to perfect those abilities which she lacked, no matter what the cost, she drew nearer to her goal day by day. One day, she was liberated from the very last fetter. The Buddha said about her that she was foremost of the nuns who had energetic courage. So she didn't, have any special powers or anything, so to speak. All she did was just very patiently just keep continuing in the study and the practice sincerely for a period of time. She just kept going at it. So it's very encouraging to know. Okay, so let's then hop over to the other link. So this is a translation by Elder Sona, verses of the Elder Sona. I gave birth to 10 children from this same body. Then when I was old and feeble, I approached a bhikkhuni. She taught me the DHAMMA, the khandhas. The khandhas are the aggregates, the 5 aggregates, the elements, and sense domains or sense bases. After I listened to her Dhamma, I cut off my hair and went forth. From training with her, my divine eye was purified. I know my past lives, where I dwelt previously. I cultivate objectless meditation with a well-collected and one-pointed mind. So here again, the translation, possibly, I don't know the Pali here in this verse. I'm just guessing that the term ekagata was used. I could be wrong. But here we can think of it as a well-collected mind. Yeah. And here continue, I was immediately liberated, quenched because of non-grasping or non-clinging. So no more craving. The 5 khandhas are fully understood, the 5 aggregates of body, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness are fully understood. They remain with roots destroyed. So they are uprooted. Not the khandhas itself, sorry, but the clinging aspect of it is destroyed. So what does it matter that I am decrepit? So this is a word that needs some help, but we can check the source later. There is now no coming back to any state of being, arahanthood. And that was it. That's from the Elder Sona. Okay, so let's see. Here it's similar. Okay, so Sona's sister nuns, who had formerly been her severe critics and who had thought that because of her age, she would not be able to change, now apologized to her sincerely and endeavored to follow her good example. So here, Sona is really became very inspiring to the other nuns as well, who in a way defied common perception that an old woman cannot gain enlightenment, or an old woman, not only an old woman, but an old woman who spent her whole life just taking care of her children and nothing else, and coming in to the older nuns with her own ways and etc., would not be able to pursue the Dhamma and practice and gain enlightenment. So she debunked that myth, so to speak. Okay. So another inspiring story from an elder nun. I hope that was useful. Oh, yes, we want to check the thesaurus, unless someone can www.thesaurus. Yeah, here we go. So deteriorated, debilitated, especially as a result of age. There you go. So basically old or getting old. Okay. So that was that. Any questions with regards to Sona with many children? Opening up the floor. Not necessarily questions, it could be comments as well. If you have anything you want to share, whether you felt it was inspiring or otherwise, whether you could relate to it yourself or in a family member. Nice talk. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, Pai. Did anyone else want to share any thoughts, any reflections? Okay, if not, we can, oops, we can share some merit. Okay, so next week we will have Hugh join us again, lead us through another sutta. Then the week after, so every fortnight, we do a reading from the Therigatha or similar. So if anyone has a particular request, please feel free to reach out. If there's a particular theory or elder nun that you're curious about, for example, Visakha or Megara's mother, even if I'm not able to find verses from Therigatha of the same disciple, sometimes it's also in a way useful, I guess. I don't know. I find it useful to read about their stories as another way to inspire our own practice. So it's not the only way, it's just another way. Okay, right. So let's share some merits. Da, 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 da. Share. Okay, so please join us in sharing merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, we shall end here. I wish everyone a pleasant week ahead. Continue to smile 6 hours as much as you can. And as you say, from his point of view, I couldn't agree more. Practicing 6 hours is probably the best form of kindness, kindness to ourselves. I didn't quite strong. That sentence isn't right. Anyway, I hope you know what I mean. And I'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye.